In this video, we will review the Santa Cruz Blur. Hey guys, if you could do me a huge favor and hit that subscribe button down below, that would help me out tremendously. Alright, so the Santa Cruz Blur is actually kind of like the child of the Santa Cruz Tallboy version 3. Now today Santa Cruz has the Tallboy version 4, which is 120mm of travel, so it's not the same. So what they've done is, as you see here, the Tallboy version 3 is pretty much the same thing as a Blur. So let's look at the geometry differences here. So the Blur with a 100mm fork, you can see it has a little bit steeper head tube angle and seat tube angle than the Tallboy version 3. So the head tube angle on the Blur is 69 degrees, seat tube angle 74 degrees, and you can see on the Tallboy it's 68 degrees and 73 degrees. If you put a 110mm fork onto the Blur, which they do have that model, it's called the TR model, which stands for trail. The head tube angle slackens to 68.5 degrees, the seat tube angle slackens to 73.5 degrees, so it's getting a little bit closer to the Tallboy version 3. Now, if you put a 120mm fork on the current Blur, it actually has the same head tube angle and seat tube angle as the Tallboy. So it's very interesting to see how close these bikes are related. So pretty much what Santa Cruz has done is they've taken the version 3 Tallboy, converted it into a pure cross-country bike, lowered the travel from 110mm down to 100mm travel. They allow you to run the lockout lever as well. So really, the Blur, the reason why it handles so well on trails and you have so much confidence with it is because basically it's a Tallboy version 3. So if you put a 100mm fork on the Tallboy version 3, it would be the same geometry as the Blur, except your bottom bracket would be a little bit different. So you can see the bottom bracket drop here with the Blur is 4mm taller than the Tallboy. Okay, so let's talk about some of the differences between the Blur and the Tallboy version 3. The Blur can clear a larger chainring, up to a 36 tooth. I was actually able to clear a 38 tooth. So if you want the higher gearing, you want to go with the Blur. The Tallboy can only clear up to a 32 tooth front chainring, and that's because of the option to run plus size tires. The Blur is a 1x specific. It has an extra brace on the rear triangle to stiffen up the rear end, which we'll talk about a little bit later. The Blur has lockout ports for a remote rear shock, while the Tallboy does not. The Blur can carry 2 bottles, full-size bottles actually, and the Tallboy is limited to just 1 bottle. So as I said before, the Tallboy can run 27 plus tires. It also can run a front derailleur if you want to run 2x. The Tallboy also has a size XXL option. So if you are a taller rider, 6'4" plus, then you probably want to go with a Tallboy version 3 instead of going with the Blur. Now as far as tire clearance, I actually measured the width between the seat tubes and the chainstays with tire clears. The Blur was 2.8 inches, while the Tallboy version 3 was 3.2 inches. So just that little bit extra width allows you to run those plus size 27.5 tires on the Tallboy. I did try to put some of the 27 plus tires in the Blur from one of my buddy's frames, and there was no way it would fit. I mean, it got in there, but it was rubbing basically all over it. So you can't put plus size tires in the Blur. The Blur is very stable, but not to the point of being boring. It is still playful and fun, but that stability gives you the confidence to push the limits further than other bikes that feel, playful. So you're actually carrying more speed, having more fun because you don't feel like you're going to fly over the bars or something. Now the rear end is kind of like the Goldilocks in the Three Bears story. It's basically just right. Many cross-country bikes out there feel like it's either too harsh for better pedaling efficiency or too plush for the trails. The Blur really kind of, blurs those two elements perfectly. Where I felt like the Anthem was a little too plush in the rear, it had some pedal bob, while the Pivot Mach 4 SL that I tried, the rear end was just a little too harsh. Now I know some of this can be fixed through the tuning of the rear shock, but the blur feels great while pedaling and equally as great descending. It really splits it perfectly with the stock tune. The rear of the bike feels very laterally stiff as well. Power is definitely being transferred down to the ground quickly, and the frame does not have that flexy feel in the middle of the frame where it feels like the rear is trying to run away from you. Santa Cruz added that other brace on the drive side because they made the blur one bike specific, and that really stiffens up the rear triangle, and you can feel it when you're really pushing hard into the turns, and also when you're standing up out of the saddle and accelerating. I've never felt so confident on steep descents than I have with this bike. The bike tracks so well and it has quick steering when you need it, even with that tiny Fox 32 fork. There's one section of our trails that is very steep, and it's always made me nervous on other bikes, but not with the blur. The first time I went through it with the blur, it just flew through the section without hesitation. Before I knew it, I was already through it, and that confidence kind of builds from that experience, and after that section, it allows me to really focus on what this bike is intended for, and that's pedaling as hard as you can without worrying about dying. Alright guys, so it's about 6:30 right now. I'm going to head to the trails. I'm going to ride the bike to the trails, not drive the vehicle. It's about 17 miles to get to the trails. Ride with some buddies, Dave and Galen. But as you can see, I put the 2 bottles on the cage there. I got some lights on the bike. I'm going to ride on the main road. Then I'm going to go meet the family at a friend's house for a little bit of swimming. So should be fun. And I'll also be able to get a feel for the bike on longer rides and when it has 2 bottles on it, a little extra weight, and yeah, we'll just see how it handles and everything. You alright?
Yeah, you alright?
Just finished my long ride with the Blur, running the 2 bottle cage option on it, and it worked really well. Hit some single track. The bottom bottle did not pop out or anything. I'm using some specialized Z cage carbon side load cages there, and they hold those bottles very well. But yeah, it worked really good. I was really concerned. I didn't know if I was going to be able to reach that bottom bottle, but it really wasn't that bad. So I was able to reach it with no problems. Also, I am running a Wolf Tooth B-Rad rail system right here. So that way I put the Specialized Z cage there with the swap box. So that way I was able to put everything in there. I was able to move my bottle up a little higher so I could reach it. And yeah, so I have all my stuff right here. The one downside is this cable's a little bit in the way because of the way the cable's routed. I may go with a different box in the future, maybe a little narrower, because it does push those out. But I do have to like kind of play with the cable here to try to get in there. But you can see all my stuff. I got CO2. I got a multi-tool, and also the Cubolito tube. If you don't have one of these as a spare, I'd recommend getting one. They're super tiny for what they are. So that's a 2.9er tube right there. So they're pricey, but they're good for having a spare in case you have a flat, of course. So yeah, definitely check those out. All right, so now we're gonna go jump in the pool. So cool off a little bit. Should be nice.
The Santa Cruz Blur is that just right bike that is super fast and efficient, yet has confidence in the technical section, which allows you to have more fun and focus on the intent of the bike, to go fast with less effort. Thank you so much for watching. If you've enjoyed this video, be sure to hit the subscribe button down below. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them down in the comments below, and we'll see you in the next video.